Welcome to the Two Michaels podcast. Today we're happy to be here with vet Emmanuel Lebensart, who is in Portugal. Michael Bloom, my co-host, is in Tel Aviv, and I am in Emek Hefer in Israel. Hello, Emmanuel.
Hi, guys. Nice to be here with you.
Nice to be here.
Yes, very nice to see you. Wow, where are you? What is this? Are you a carpenter?
No. This is a dome in the. We have a land in the south of Portugal, about 2 hours south of Lisbon. We've been living in Portugal for about 10 years and lived in another land for a few years and then sold that land. And about a year ago, bought this quite big land. It's 84 hectares, 840 dunam of land. And we live on it alone. With a bit of animals in this giant dome that you're kind of seeing. And yeah, that's where we are geographically.
I have to ask you about the tattoos. I mean, wow, what's on your neck?
This is an edge of a tree of life struggling to live, like our world. The tattoos are something that I started a bit after I got into the army in Israel. I don't know. It was initially just like everybody else, like a little comet or whatever on the back of my shoulder that I thought it's in a safe place. Nobody can see it and I can have my little rebellion. And 20 some years later, it's all over the body. I don't know. It's a progression. I couldn't really explain it.
I see. Okay, very interesting. Sorry, what I love about the Two Michaels, it is a journey for me. I'm sure it is for Michael Simkin as well, where every time we get better, we understand how to do this in a more fun way. And what I like to do is not to know what the subject is about. So Simkin, he knows more than me who the guest is. I don't really know, so I'm really curious to see. I mean, you must be an artist of some sort, judging by your skin and by what's behind you.
Yeah. Wow, I wouldn't know. No, not an artist. I, like Michael kind of said in the introduction, by education, I'm a veterinarian. But I have been now for about 15 years a retired veterinarian. And currently, I'm basically raising horses on this farm with my wife and my son, trying to figure out different ways of making this, regenerating this land that I'm on, learning new techniques, things like that.
Yeah, sounds amazing. I mean, still, I know the interview is going to be about something completely different, not about you being an artist. So, yeah. Wow, Simkin, where do we go from here?
Manu, start telling us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I was born in Jerusalem, Israel, to a pretty, or I would say a very normative upbringing. Father who was a doctor, mother who was a social worker. 2 siblings, 1 older sister, 1 younger sister, and a pretty stable, typical middle-class Jerusalem family. Went to a conservative school. My father had been a religious person in his childhood and opted for secularism when he was older, but wanted to give us a choice kind of similar to what he had, so put us in a conservative school. And my mother, being American, it was a school also of many mixed children or children whose parents both were Anglo-Saxon and made Aliyah, so it was a very, very protective, gentle upbringing in that regard. I was a bit of what today would be called the hyperactive child and would be given all sorts of different labels, but getting in trouble progressively more and more into my teens. When it started to involve violence, I was enrolled in martial arts at the time, Denis Hissardut. It was a form of
survival
jiu-jitsu, I would say.
Yeah. Wow.
Uh,
Okay.
Was that
finished high school.
significant?
So finished high school, went into special forces, served for 3 years in Shimshon. It was a unit that operated in Gaza at the time until it was disbanded, and then we moved to Duvdevan or Cherry Squad, which was the sister squad in the West Bank. Got out of the army, went to South America for my trip. Again, everything a bit very this typical Israeli track we take.
But did you trip on the trip?
No, I was very, because of this whole army thing, and I was at the time where I was very into it. I didn't touch anything before the army.
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to minimize my chances of getting into the places I wanted to get into. I started experimenting with marijuana a bit before this trip to South America, and more, but not very extensively on this trip. It lasted about 8 or 9 months. I started it in New York and ended it in New York because I still had family there. My grandmother was still living in Manhattan.
Okay. I can't stop myself, but I have to ask you, when did your illness start? And if you could tell us about that.
So I'm about to reach it in, I would say, the next 3 sentences. I finish this trip and I come back to Israel. And no, I want to study veterinarian studies. And as I'm poking into it, I realize it's going to be very difficult with my high school degree, which was okay, but nothing to talk about. It would be very hard to get in. And at the time, I meet a friend who studied medicine in Hungary and told me what a wonderful place it was, and everything was great. And quite quickly, I decided I'm going for it myself, and I go enroll in pre-med in Budapest. And I realize I'm in trouble right away. I don't mix with the people. The weather is doing me, the cold weather is really, really freezing me, both on a physical and a mental level. And I go into a pretty deep depression that I did not realize was a deep depression at the time. But I carry through, and the studies are going okay until the middle of my 4th year. I'm in exam period, and I realize that something is very off. I'm unable to bring myself at all to study. The depression is deepening to a level that I've never felt before, and something feels a little bit reactive about it, to the degree that I write an email at the time to my mother and I tell her I feel like a dam ready to burst. And sorry, I'll just...
Wow, depression.
Depression
Not
was
pleasant.
Depression is the easy part.
Uh-huh. What do you mean?
I finished this exam period kind of not really making it, carrying on a few exams to the next. I'm not in it at all. And I'd wanted to stop it in the middle and go back to Israel to rest. It didn't work out, and I decided to go to Amsterdam instead with a couple of friends. And we go to Amsterdam, and I experiment with a few mushrooms. The
Nice.
culmination being a wonderful truffle called the Philosopher's Stone. And I have a very, very strong trip, which I was not accustomed to. At that point, I've experienced, but not something like that. The proper death and rebirth without any preparation. And as I'm dying on the carpet in that room, in the shitty room in Amsterdam, some inner voice comes up and says, "Hey, everything's okay. Yes, you are dying. Take it easy. Enjoy the ride and just relax." And I follow that kind of inner instructions and have a very, very interesting, profound experience. And following that, I come back to Hungary and I say, "Hey, I need a break. I've reached a point where I cannot handle things. And I want a year off." I go to Israel. I take a bit of time off. My parents ask me if I feel like I can go back. And I say, no, I need a break. and we agree upon this break, and the relief of this decision sends me into what begins to be in the beginning a manic attack. And
What's that? What's a manic attack? Simkin, do you know?
I have an idea, but I think Emmanuel's in a much better position to answer that than I am.
True.
Okay, so on the surface, what you start to notice, and I did notice, but couldn't really, you're becoming much more extroverted. You're speaking much more. You can't stop. You're smoking much more. You stop eating. You stop sleeping. On the inner level, there are two very interesting things that happen to you. Physiologically, your hearing becomes sharper, your eyesight, all your senses are sharper. And you realize it. It blows you away. You can hear things 20 meters away. You can zoom in on sound. It's like having suddenly these superpowers that you have anyway, but we just don't use them that way.
Yeah.
But it comes with a kind of total opening of your attention, but with that, a total inability to filter any of it. So your senses are sharper, all of them. Your emotional response is much higher. Your mind is flying much faster, and you're unable to filter. So in the beginning, it feels wondrous, and you think you're enlightened. Something is opened in you, like your brain is open to 100% capacity. But very quickly, you start to drown under the onslaught of information. And on an emotional level, at least with me, but I by now know it's a pretty typical thing, pretty quickly anger becomes a dominating emotion. What starts as a pure idea of enlightenment is totally taken over by the ego and becomes I am enlightened, and you feel superior and you're acting that way, and it's of course not being taken so well, but then your reaction to that is indignant because you really feel you're in this higher plane. And slowly the anger and the ego and the physical exhaustion start making this into a lot unpleasant. The inattention costs you all sorts of minor or major injuries. And then again, depending on how long it goes, and in my case, it would go for quite long, there is a wasting away on every level, emotional, mental, physical. And in my case, what happened was that after about 10 days of this experience, it was starting to go, the beginning of it going chaotic and me realizing that something else was happening. And I called a friend and said, look, I think I went crazy. I'm not sure what to do about it. I'd like you to come pick me up. It was a very good friend of mine. I'd known him from childhood. I said, go to my parents. They'll buy you a ticket. I had 2 dogs. I had an apartment. I had no clue how to even begin to collect myself out of this place. And he comes over and he picks me up. And in about 10 days, I'm back in Israel in some small house that was rented for me in a moshav. And I basically say, look, I realize I went crazy. I can do this. I don't need treatment. I just need time. And the reaction was very much not that from my family. My father, who had experience with mental health in his family, where his mother ultimately killed herself when he was a teenager. And I think for him, this was a very red flag emergency from the beginning. And he was pushing very strongly to hospitalize me. And I had a belief at the time that that would kill me and that I can do this on my own, but I was willing to, I didn't even have a very strong idea against treatment. I said, I need time to digest this. I want to see a psychologist. After I see the psychologist, I want to see a psychiatrist, and let's talk from there. And what followed was some different manipulations to try to get me committed, because my father by then was a professor, not a doctor, and could manipulate the system much better than I could. And through this friend who came to get me, I found a psychiatrist on my own. Through a very nice story of chance, it turned out to be a very, very, very special person. He was a psychiatrist, but he was also a doctor of Chinese medicine. We met in his house, not in a clinic. He would meet me at crazy hours, like 11 at night, and charged me no money. Told me to pay it forward when I got the chance. A really, really special person. And for the first month or so, he told me, let's try without. I mean, gave me some things like do cold showers, try to exert as much energy as you can, try to take in as many calories as you can. And but mainly, I guess, to show me that I had no chance. And after about a month, I realized I'm losing this battle and getting much worse. And what helped me was that I could, because I understood physiology, I understood that I am burning myself out, and this is a finite resource I'm using.
How did you know? How did you notice it was getting worse? Sorry, do you have an example?
On an inner level, I could feel it and see it. I was skeletal. I had many wounds that were all infected. Small wounds, small cuts that you get from inattention, but then inattention to them, and everything was everything about me was infected, like stigmata.
Wow.
And on an outer level, my meetings with strangers were very quickly descending to chaos and verge of violence sometimes. Not so much me, but it has a reaction you meet many times from people who are suddenly in a, I guess, frightening situation.
Yeah. Okay. So it was getting worse.
And run-ins with the law even. You'll be walking somewhere and police will notice me, where that's nothing that's ever happened to me before. And it might have been my behavior, it might have been my look, I don't know. But then those turned into pretty intense meetings because you yourself are confused, and that's clear. And I look a bit scary. I was already quite tattooed at the time, and I always gave off, I guess, a fearful look.
So what happened? Things got worse and worse and worse and worse, and then what?
And then I go to this doctor called Mickey Pollack. We try a little bit of the natural way. And at one point I say, okay, I understand. This doesn't work. What do we do? And he gives me a pill called Depalept, which is a pill that was developed for people with epilepsy and was found to have efficacy for people who are experiencing psychosis, bringing people down. His diagnosis of me was that I was bipolar. Probably, given my familial background on both sides, yes, the drugs could have been something that were part of it, but not the main thing. For him, it was a genetic thing. And it's important in terms of if it is a drug-induced one with no real background, there's sometimes a chance the person only has one episode. And it allows a totally different approach. And when you are someone with a background of it, the likelihood of it recurring is high, and that means basically treatment for life.
Wow.
So I'm told that I'm going to have to be on these pills for life. They have pretty bad side effects, which I'm going to get used to. And we start this road. I get a job as a gardener. With some connections I had in that area in Israel that I lived. It was close to some family. And for the next 8 months, I'm seeing this doctor once a week for psychotherapy. And in a very nice way, he is going through the story with me and constantly telling me, please cherish these moments. You're going to mourn this experience. And it's important to mourn it and put it behind you. And we go through that, and I feel that I'm getting better with the work. I'm feeling more and more myself. In terms of the medication, I feel totally switched off. Emotionally, mentally, I'm very slow, but I'm also very depleted from the psychotic attack. And I am climbing up, but I'm not really figuring out the world around me. And after about 4 or 5 months, this pill takes you below the balanced area. And he keeps telling me, I recommend you to get on antidepressants because this does not stop at 5. You're going down.
5 what, sorry? You mean 5 out of 10?
In 5 out of 10, yes. Basically, to put it in the most layman terms, you pay for a manic episode with a depressive episode. In the simplest way, the ups and downs of life. You're heading for a depression, period. No way to avoid it.
Is it like a come down?
What's that?
Is it like a come down?
Yes, but again, you don't get to rest at some comfortable place. You reached an 11 and you're going down to minus 11. You're going to match the height with the depth of the depression. I did not know that then. But what he knew was you are heading for a major depression and you should be prepared.
Okay.
And I felt that this was already an exaggeration. I did not want pills. And suddenly I'm taking pills to take me down, pills to bring me up. I was gaining weight. I was wondering when the pills to lose weight would come and pills to balance everything. I said, I can do this. But beginning of the summer, I reached what was for me the very first time where I realized that I am suicidal. And there was the first time it happened, it was a bit of a heartbreak. I didn't think that I was a candidate for that kind of thing. And when I realized that I've had enough and I think I'm offing myself, the first thing was that I was disappointed in myself. But I was in such a state that I guess I didn't really care. I didn't have how, and I was very much into the how and not figuring it out, and I guess not wanting to. And in the midst of figuring out how, I decided I'm going to figure out how to not, and told Mickey, look, time for the antidepressants. I'm about to kill myself. And he said, great, I'm glad we're in this talking about it, and put me on antidepressants. And I was on those for several more months. And as the new term started in my university, I said one day, look, I'm going back. I want to finish my studies, and taking a longer break is going to make it harder for me. And at the time, it was only like 6 months after I'd had the psychotic attack. And he said, look, I strongly recommend you don't go back. You need to wait another year. And I knew I cannot wait another year. I'm staying this guy, a gardener, for the rest of my life if I'm waiting another year. And I took, of course, told my family and everything I'm going for it. Went back with medication, took the exams that I needed to take that I had missed because of my attack. Passed them and resumed studies a year, dropped 1 year. And continued quite smoothly with them. After a while, dropped the antidepressants. They were making me impotent, physically and emotionally, and I had a very nice, active sex life at the time, and wanted it back, and thought I could understood something about the depression, that I could handle it, and dropped the antidepressants, which improved my life greatly because I did understand that, and naturally was moving out of it. There's something of a time in it as well, that I later understood. I could almost know ahead of time how much time I'm going to have of a depression, depending on how long I was psychotic for. And I'm nearing the end of my studies, and my mind is not sharp enough. And I read about this Depalept and realize that I can gradually decrease doses over a certain time, and I do that. I decrease it to a quite low level where my mind gets a lot sharper, and I do the final exams, and they all go very easy for me. That it was nice. And right after that, I increase it again. It wasn't an attempt to get off it. Just I needed my mind to be sharper.
Yeah, clear.
And I stayed on the medication for a few more months, came back to Israel and had my license exam. So again, decreased gradually my dosages, passed my licensing exam, got offered a job opportunity by a friend in the north. I wanted to go into horses, so that was where I wanted to be. And as I got there, I said to myself, okay, You're on a very low dosage now. Time to try without. And took myself off the medication. Told no one about it. And sorry, I have one thing I neglected to mention is going into this, I was a user of marijuana. All through it, I stayed a user of marijuana. It was always an argument between me and Mickey, who had become kind of a authority voice I trusted about the marijuana in terms of benefits or deficits of it. I felt that the benefits outweighed the negative side of it. And in the north, I am now only on marijuana, and I am doing very well. I'm a young vet. Things are going very well for me. I moved from that job with a friend to another friend of his who was a horse veterinarian who had a mixed practice. And I get into that practice, and it's going wonderfully, and I'm doing very well. Everything, I'm enjoying this like I've never enjoyed anything. It is the job of my dreams. I'm driving around the north in my pickup truck, playing with horses and being paid for it. I feel like the luckiest man alive. But after about a year and a half of this, I enter again a depression, which I start to realize is the cycle I'm in. And I can kind of feel like objectively nothing has changed around me. I was very happy just a while ago, and I'm very unhappy now. And I can see I'm progressing in my cycle. And I decide not to avoid it. I feel like I have a death sentence on my head, but I'm more bothered by the fact that I'm scared shitless than by the fact that I'm fucked. Pardon my French. And I say, I am going for this. And I quit my job exactly at the time where I'm offered a wonderful partnership and everything. And I go to India. I sell the pickup. I give my dogs for someone to take care of. And I go off for 6 months in India, where from, I guess, second number one, I'm already manic. Just from stepping off the plane, just from leaving that life behind and being in a backpack, something of that freedom sends me flying without any breaks.
So hang on a minute. Instead of going down into a depression, by going to India, you actually turned it around and moved towards being manic again and prevented the depression?
It took me several months to manage the funds and everything for India. I'm entering deeper and deeper into this depression. And yes, getting to India in a backpack with no responsibilities whatsoever, and the spirit around me literally instantaneously, I am no longer depressed. I am slightly to more than slightly manic.
That's amazing.
And a month later, I am psychotic. But again, I went to India for a reason. I understood that there would be much more freedom to be this in India. It was also a good friend of mine who would later become a teacher, but he kept telling me also that in India you would not be treated in the same way. And I understand that that'll give me time to study this thing. I am not going to win by shutting it down every time. I got to figure out what this thing is, what it's doing to me. And for 6 months, I am feeling enlightened, but understanding that I'm also psychotic, or maybe only psychotic. I guess, again, India, keeping it together. I spent the whole 6 months there.
Can I ask you, when you say psychotic, what does that mean?
Again, I mean that I'm sleeping very little, maybe an hour a night for very, very long times. I'm eating very little. I'm fasting for a few days sometimes, like it's nothing, like it's between breakfast and lunch. I'm talking to so many people, sometimes almost having a following of younger people. I'm reading a lot of New Age Enlightenment stuff, and I'm incorporating a lot of it, and it's mixing into what I'm understanding within the psychosis. There is a lot of truth in it and a lot of power in it.
maybe I got this wrong, but I understood psychosis means seeing things that are not really there. Is that right?
That's not necessary. Psychosis will be a higher. Let's say if mania is a certain level, and once you go into psychosis, it is a higher, much more destructive layer, and it will involve hallucinations if you were prone to hallucinations before.
Okay.
If you're a schizophrenic who involves hallucinations in it, those will get stronger, more chaotic, more influential.
Wow.
As did for me in later stories. I'll tell you.
About India. So it seems like India was the cure. Instead of taking pills, you took India as a pill. And I don't remember. Did you say that you eventually did experience a depression in India, or you actually avoided it?
No, I did avoid depression. What I didn't avoid, India bought me time. But after 6 months, I was batshit crazy in a very calm way because I was in a calm country. But I reached a place called Orcha, which is about 4 hours south of Delhi, not very traveled place with a lot of temples. And there I experienced a deepening of my experience. After a few days in some guest house, was moved out of the guest house and moved to the streets. And after about a week with that, I got in trouble with the police there. I broke into some, it's a horrible story. I ended up walking nude in some dark street at night to a temple to ask for help from some person who had been kind to me before. And he, seeing some Westerner crying naked in his door, of course, slammed the door in my face. And something in me said, hey, you're opening that door. And it was a large metal barred door, but I'm a strong guy, and I broke that door down, but I smashed his face in with the door by mistake, and he got injured in his face.
My God.
We both ended up in the temple next door, and slowly police started arriving. But by that time, I had paid for several people to be treated for malaria. I'd had several talks with people in the Muslim community there, the Hindu community, the sadhus in the place were all inviting me to smoke with them all the time and saying that I am one of them. 2 cops as well, like they would tell cops, go away, and on purpose pass me a chillum in front of the police, which would have to leave. So members of this community start arriving as well and saying, hey, this guy is not a bad guy. He's been very helpful to some people here in the shanty town. He's having a mental breakdown. And what I'm offered is a night of house arrest in the guest house that I had previously stayed in, which I, of course, accept. I'm even given, because it was so confused in India, the cop who threatened to hit me during the arrest came to me with a bag of weed and a chillum before he closed the door and said, I'm sorry, because to him, I was also a holy man. And he didn't want to mess with the God, so he gave me some weed and a chillum and said, I'm sorry, and locked the door. And I was escorted in a taxi with police on motorbikes out of this state. And behind the scenes, the 2 Israeli girls that were with me were working with my family to get me out of Dodge. And at that point, I started saying, hey, I have to go back to Israel. And when they said, okay, we're arranging for someone to come, I said, great. And my brother-in-law and this guy who had initially told me about India and had become a teacher of mine in the process came with him, a guy called Shmuel, who is a teacher of, he does Greenberg, which is some systems an Israeli guy developed with mapping your foot. Mm-hmm. And if you're not reflexology, but like your emotional, mental map, and then corresponding areas in the body. And he was into other stuff, and he was introducing me into this world. So he came with my brother-in-law.
Simkin, I'm just wondering if or maybe I'll ask Emmanuel. So is this getting anywhere, the story, or can we start asking questions about what is mental illness? And I have a theory that there is no such thing as a mental illness. I want to run it by you and get your reaction to it.
I'll tell you then where it gets to. It gets to that the philosophy was it's coming anyway, go for it rather than avoid it. The next time I went for it, I even went for it on some shamanic journey with a friend that involved a lot of tripping on LSD and purposefully throwing myself again and again into the fires. And 17 years later and 2 forceful hospitalizations later with the works, which is something I would like to maybe get to, I figured it out. In the middle of a closed ward in Israel, after about 11 days there, somebody said something to me that clicked. And 2.5 weeks later, I was out of there with the doctor saying, no one's gotten out of here so quickly. We don't know how you did it. And have not had in the 6 years past any manic attacks or any depressions. And it's by design. It's not that it hasn't happened. In the beginning, it would arise, but I would know how to work the energy. And by now, it doesn't even arise.
Wow. Simkin, I have so many questions. I'm sure you do as well.
But not right this second. I'm just still listening to Manu explain
Okay.
the story.
Sorry, Emmanuel. Carry on.
I'll say a few
what was the click when you said you had an understanding? What was that understanding?
I'll tell you. I understood very easily, if you examined yourself, that what somebody did with this medication was turn down your volume significantly. But since there was no selectiveness in this, it turned down all of you. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, I am 2% of the time crazy to a degree that it bothers me. But 100% of the time, I'm being depressed on every level. I'm slower in my mind. I'm less connected emotionally. My body is fat and less connected. I'm slower physically, and I'm supposed to accept this to avoid 2%. I said, on the first basis, I'm willing to take the 2%. I can take a beating. I saw the first round. I can go through this. So that was my first understanding. My second understanding was, as Michael said, I don't think this is a mental illness. I had a very, very clear feeling in my first manic attack that this is a summoning. Clear to the degree that what they felt was the craziness, because I felt I heard God speaking to me and would not apologize to it. But what he was telling me was more or less, listen, this has been an opening. The road to understanding it is going to be long and hard. You're going to be crucified many times on the way. Stay strong. There's a reason. You are correct. Make it through. And that's what I held the whole time. I don't want to be turned off by you people. I need to figure out how to not fly so high close to the sky where the glue will loosen up and I drop to the floor. I'll figure it out. I need to figure this thing out. And then going into every episode, what I would do is at the point where I didn't manage and saw I was about to kill myself, I'd call Mickey. I'd say, Mickey, medication. What do you have to offer me this time? He'd offer something. I'd say, sure. Remember, I don't want to be very fat. He'd say, I'm keeping that in consideration. And I'd start a new medication with the intent of getting off it when I feel better. And when I was told that's what every manic person does, I said, yes, because you cannot live with this medication. It's not because we feel we've made it. It's because we cannot live like this. I'm not even going to try. I'm going to get better. I'm going to try to be without it again. I'm going to fail, and so on and so forth.
Amazing. So you know about what is illness, and in terms of what I said, you referred to what I said. I just said I just gave a little. I just touched upon it slightly, but I'd like to expand on it and to get your reaction to the idea that, well, I've often asked myself, well, I know that the reality that I live in is very twisted and manipulated by different forces that have different interests, and they infiltrate our education system and the economy and health and many other aspects of our lives. So our lives are kind of twisted in many ways and deformed and unnatural. We behave, I mean, we are in constant cognitive dissonance. I mean, we're happy to accept that there's wars and hundreds of thousands of people die. Yeah, because, there's a war, and we just, rationalize it away, which is complete psychotic behavior in a way. It's cognitive dissonance on an international scale. Now, some people experience true enlightenment, or they experience a spiritual awakening of some sort. In the old days, the shaman would have taken that person and worked with them and invested time and energy in them. But in today's twisted society, they hospitalize you, they stick you in a loony bin, they give you medication, they try and make you avoid it. So then I wonder, maybe there is no such thing as mental illness or manic depression. There's just, it just depends how you judge it, from what perspective. And in an ideal world, which what you just proved by going to India, suddenly you don't have depression. It means it's to do with the society you live in. It's to do with the norms. It's to do with the accepted ways of behavior and your ability to abide by them or not. What do you think?
I agree with you to somewhat, where I would many times say that the mental disturbance disturbs other people a lot more than it disturbs the mentally disturbed.
Yeah.
And India did allow me some glimpse of the fact that it is possible. However, it is progressive, and one cannot control this dragon of psychosis. And he or it has a script of its own, and it leads to chaos, because we can get into it, and I am very, very critical of what went on in my hospitalizations. The first one, much more than the second, because it was literally dropping into the cuckoo's nest, literally from the movie, and thinking this has to be a joke. You guys had to do better than this. Thinking it has to be, it cannot be. Did you guys literally try to do it like that? But living in a place like that, which was more insane than anything I'd experienced before. But again, although I was hospitalized, I think I hospitalized myself. There is a level at which it is unhealthy to you as an individual, physically and emotionally. If you're unable to build back from it, you are left a much lesser human than you started out. And I met many of those around that you wouldn't believe what they used to be. Or you would, of course, because of your approach. But you'd see where they've been diminished by themselves, by the illness, and by the institutions treating them to something almost subhuman. But a lot of that is also the condition itself. It is too much power for you to handle without proper training. In the Kabbalah, they talk about the vase of your soul cracking because it cannot handle the light being entered into it. And what I once told Mickey, my shrink, I said, hey, you told me here's a new vase. And I looked at the vase you offered and it kind of sucked. And I said, you know what? Why do I need a new vase? I can fix the one that cracked. And it took 17 years, but I managed to. And now I'm able to hold that light.
How did you fix it?
One of the things I'd come upon early on was in a American book that was called The Complete Guide to Bipolar Disorder, of course, a very American, very unreadable book that slowly was basically building up a kind of Excel sheet for you where you put as many practical and emotional aspects in your life, and you started to map them out. How much am I sleeping? How much am I eating? What's hours am I eating? It becomes very specific. And the first time I saw it, I said, I'm not willing to do this. Again, this is not life. But throughout the years, I started to understand that I need to build myself a template like this to make it more simple than the one I'd seen. So, for instance, food and sleep are the biggest key ones I'll be monitoring constantly. That I'm getting around 5-6 hours of sleep. roughly between midnight and 6 in the morning, and that I'm eating more or less 2 square meals a day. And that is something I followed religiously or less religiously before. As Manya would approach, my appetite would go away. And in the beginning, I'd stop eating. Later, I'd start force feeding myself during these times. I'd be chewing a sandwich for 2 hours, telling myself, I don't care, this thing is going down. You're not hungry, but you haven't eaten today. You're gonna eat. I was basically creating a firewall system in my mind to start pushing me away from losing control. And it had this mental aspect of following this kind of table. Within this table, I also put psychedelic experiences, and I would space them at around 6 months apart.
Can you tell us about them? Can you tell us an example about one of your psychedelic experiences as part of your self-healing process, and tell us about what did you feel, what did you see, what did you learn, what conclusions you came out with from the actual trip?
So during the time, there were, again, several ones that would show me there is a very strong feeling when entering any psychedelic experience, but the way I did it and the way I believe is, I don't want to use the word correct, but my style, and it fit with the man I am, I would always go for the maximal dose I can take on something. I've taken it before, I've not taken it before, I don't care. I'm going to take what's more or less the maximum you're recommended.
So, did you take mushrooms, for example? Did you take mushrooms? If yes,
I take mushrooms,
how many grams?
No, recommended astronauts.
How much?
10 grams.
10 grams.
Now, again, if you gave me amanita, I would not take 10 grams. But any mushrooms I take, that's what I eat.
Wow.
LSD would be 3.5 drops. That's the way to trip, by the way.
I would be scared. I would be shitting myself.
But I knew I can lose myself every 3 years. So I went for it, and you very much do lose yourself on those doses. And in every material, you lose yourself on the higher doses and reach a similar place.
Manuk, I have a question. In terms of talking about various issues, we're saying maybe to say mental illness is unfair or wrong, but issues that people encounter. Say something about what are the origins of these problems? In your experience, can you see a commonality? Why do you think is it chance? Is it genetics, or is there another reason why you might have encountered these experiences?
The simple answer would be that I think it's all of the above. It's chance, it's genetics, it's very much also what Michael was speaking about, which was the reaction of the society we live in. Because I was never a conforming person. I was a pretty wild guy, but within the confines of what was accepted. I went to the army, I went to special forces, I went to study medicine. It was what was accepted of me, and I was moving still within those lines. But I, from a very young age, understood that they are restrictive to the degree that they put me in an inauthentic place all the time. Now, I would not have worded it so well as a child, but I was enacting the person I thought I was supposed to be, causing a lot of damage to the person I actually was, acting out this strong Israeli military persona when I knew I was a very sensitive person, and not allowing that any room. And I think all of that repression with my given background led to me exploding it all out. And just myself saying to me, here I am, every ugly part of it, everything flooded me in that first time. And why it is so akin to, or cannot be called, not a spiritual awakening, because I was full of love towards this thing that appeared in front of me.
Well, so is it something to do with being pushed to be inauthentic? And the sort of and that the explosion is something like a need to return to authenticity.
Yes, but I think again it's on a very deep level, because even if you are in an area where now as an adult I was very trusted, everything was on the surface, showed me that we're all behind you. I'm living in a different country. Nobody is worried about my conduct. No one's asking questions about my conduct. But that is a fake surface level, because as a child, I understood I am not trusted at all, and started to understand that I don't trust me at all either. I believe them. There's a point where I lose it. I become dangerous. As a young child, it was just this violence that was easily curbed with going into martial arts, but oh shit, as an adult, this is what it looks like. So for me, this was, this is the beast everyone was always warning me about. The potential in it in me was obvious to me, and now it's out here, and I've let it happen.
Okay. What's life now like after this? What,
Wonderful after it. For me, the key to doing this, I understood from a very early stage, was akin to what somebody was trying to figure something out about stillness was doing. With whatever stillness means, mindfulness, I don't know, whatever it means to the person who's listening to it. To me, it means pretty much what it sounds like, that I could have more stillness in me. And I felt that more stillness would help me recognize ripples. Rather than so much motion, I could miss out on the cues that I was trying to tell me, Emmanuel, you're heading to a time where you need to be slightly more cautious. And I would follow the cycles. I still do. I know when my cycles used to be, and I feel how my mind wants to go manic. But I have that separation from the mind that allows me to say, okay, I hear you. Now we're having dinner. And now we're going to sleep, and I meditate myself to sleep, and I'm out in 10 seconds, whether I want to or not.
So what happened to you? I mean, can you say, I mean, if we were to ask a psychiatrist, he would say, I would have thought that you had an episode, a psychotic episode, you had manic depression, bipolar, blah, 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 DXRMBF, whatever classified code they have, and that's it, and he's happy with that. Then you ask me, I'd say you didn't have anything. You had a spiritual awakening, a very powerful experience of feeling one, all these things that Zen Buddhism talks about. I mean, look at the result. You became very spiritual in your day-to-day life. You actually practice spirituality and things that the Buddha himself really encouraged everyone to do. So give me another perspective of what happened to you, and I would encourage you not to use anything negative in terms of I was ill, I was sick, I had this condition, that condition, etc.
No, but I have to say, for me, it is both. I am willing to accept their terminology for it. I do not agree with it, but it does not insult me. It's a descriptive title. Does not cover me at all. I like to say that if they knew the half of it, they'd understand I'm a lot crazier than the few simple points. I allowed myself to become fully insane. I am in no way a sane person. The way I behave with other people is totally different to how I was before. It is very open, very blunt. A lot of it is exactly as I was before. There is a very deep acceptance of myself. That is something that had to come. I had to either kill this thing I was seeing or love it.
Before what? So before you started seeing that thing, what's that thing that you started seeing?
You have to imagine this. We are not speaking of a beautiful spiritual journey. We are speaking of 7 psychotic attacks with breaks of about 3 years that take about a year to recover from, 8 months of the attack itself, a year and a half to recover from, which left me about a year and a half to kind of try to get my life back together. I'd start to work again, boom, break of everything again. I was in shambles and losing friends slowly, getting into trouble with police, which was something that would recur, so it showed up on my files. I was not living a life of some spiritual journeyman. I was getting progressively in trouble with the system, knowing I'm closer, but knowing that I have to do it again there's only a way through it.
But perhaps that was like your birth canal. So you actually traveled through this birth canal and you've had runnings with the law and things like that. But that's not a bad thing. That's the baby, pushing his way through the birth canal, having a religious, spiritual experience.
For me, if you ask me on a personal level, this is the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. I knew it from day one. Again, I suffered. I almost killed myself several times, but I persevered, and I feel enlightened today. I feel enabled rather than disabled, although I have 100% disability in Israel. For me, it is definitely a positive journey full of suffering and difficulty, which, of course, every journey must have suffering and difficulty for us to grow. The reason I tell you that it is a mixed thing is because I have not yet met another person like me who made it through to the other side. And the people I have met have been for years and still are being ravaged by this dynamic. Now, part of it is, of course, because nobody told them, hey, there is the medical description of it, but there is another possibility. And through hard work and through some failure, you're going to come out whole, whatever whole will mean to that person. And it will always mean more than what came in. But to most people, does not end in a spiritual journey.
Yeah. The dark night of the soul.
Story.
A sad story, yeah. Simkin,
Yeah.
Have you heard of the dark side of the soul thing? Someone said once.
Dark night of the soul was a phrase used by Christian mystics, I understand. Semi-awakening has taken place, and that's a very difficult patch between being stuck in the ego construct or not.
Yes.
In time, that phrase has come to mean all sorts of things.
Right.
Well, I want to ask you sort of why your story strikes me as super unusual, and I'm guessing what separates you from other people is basically balls. You were willing to meet it head on, however painful that is, and that was kind of this baptism of fire that was necessary to reach a state of self-acceptance, rather than accepting the way that the system wants to pigeonhole you. Is that right?
Again, right and wrong, because the mania itself and psychosis later give you the feeling like you have the balls of a dragon. So every psychotic person I've met, or every person who's been through this, they want to go there. That's also something you got to not want. All other crazy people I've met are elated to finally be crazy again. They're finally themselves again. What I understood very quickly was, hey, I'm kind of an extrovert. The distance isn't very big. I need to be me. And then I won't need to explode yelling, here I am. And that slowly worked. But I think what gave me more than balls was discipline. I knew I'm never giving up. I had this from a young age. I had it in the army. I don't stop, period. I intend to get there. I heard some guy once talking about a solar plane journey that he made, a Frenchman, and he said, impossible only means no one did it yet. And I said, okay, so all the doctors say it's impossible. Watch me do it. I'm doing it. And people would say, you're failing miserably. I knew I'm not failing miserably. I'm learning another move every time.
Yeah.
And then, but discipline, because discipline is what allows you to hold all the lines all the time.
Yes. Are there any red flags and signs that maybe perhaps people could identify and maybe act in a certain way, which you would recommend?
Yes, and I'm glad we are using the term red flags and rather than triggers. And I'll say why I'm bringing in triggers to the talk. Going in again from the classical standpoint, you're told to avoid anything that could trigger you basically into a good mood. You're supposed to never have a good mood again. So of course, marijuana is off the table, alcohol is off the table. Very exciting things are off the table. If you were to take a trip that involves several nights of camping and you're not sleeping well, not eating well, maybe you don't do it. And then triggers would be, okay, marijuana is a trigger for you. Or I don't know what, you used to do skydiving. Its trigger is for you because it brings you up. And to me, what I understood pretty quickly, it's like Chekhov's gun. If we're looking at the trigger, we're already getting ready for a shot. You have to learn to hold the gun. And again, it's very much for me came out of the army and the discipline. It's very much about holding a weapon, but having a safety, but not trying to treat it like a bouquet of flowers. So what I said was, okay, triggers are out the door because if I'm already thinking of triggers, I'm fucked. I'm already on the way. I tried playing by triggers. By the time I noticed them, I was already hypomanic to manic and gone.
Yeah.
I said, you need to map out several red flags, which are places that you either never navigate or always navigate with full mindfulness. Meaning, for instance, if we were speaking of psychedelic trips, if I had suddenly a very profound psychedelic experience that felt like wow, and the only thing I wanted to do was go back and try again, I would say fair enough. Let's see you in 6 months. This was a lovely mushroom or this was a lovely cactus. I'll come again. I'm not coming now.
Mm. Cool.
Sleep and food again were my biggest flags. I could see myself losing appetite. I could see myself not wanting to sleep or waking up many times because your subconscious plays also a role in this. And you fall asleep, but if you're heading for manic, it wakes you up. So I would meditate myself to sleep sometimes 15 times a night rather than say, fine, I'm getting up at 4, it's cool, I'm going to go see the stars.
Yeah. Cool. Simkin, I'm wondering if there's, yep.
You're wondering what?
No, before, if there's anything you want to say, then now is the time because I want to say something concluding.
No, I mean, I'm very happy to hear you talking this way, Anu. It's an honor to be able to listen to you.
Of course. And is there a message? I'm wondering, I mean, I would like to say what my message of Emmanuel's words is. If you guys get inspired, feel free to give your message as well. So my message is short and is the crazy is the sane and the sane is the crazy. What do you think, Simkin? Do you have a message?
I'm going to avoid messages.
I see. Emmanuel?
I have a message. I think part of this is the most important thing to me would be to a person who is experiencing something like this. And the younger the person is, I think the stronger and more important the message could be, because there most definitely is what to do with this thing that has emerged in your life suddenly. It requires all sorts of innovation and using the medical technology we have around, but knowing how to drop it at the right times. It requires a lot of work, but there's definitely another side to it where you can live a full, happy life, unmedicated, not crazy anymore, integrated, incorporated, and whole.
Amazing. Wow. Fantastic. Simkin, I'm gobsmacked.
I'm happy to hear. It happens.
Yes. Okay. So I had a really good time. I learned a lot.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Manu.
Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, thank you. Have a lovely day, and thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.
Enjoy the journey.